Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the LEGO Legend of Zelda Custom Showcase Wave 2, where today we'll be taking a look at the polybag of this, our second wave of custom sets, Z00021, with 93 pieces. It's the Blight Ganons from Breath of the Wild. Now, being a polybag, obviously you don't get all four in just one set. This is actually a 4-in-1, so the parts are included to build one of the four options, and if you wanted all four, you would have to buy 4 copies. So as I mentioned, this is set number Z0021, the Blight Ganons for ages 8 and up, with 93 pieces, retailing for £5 Great British pounds and containing 0 minifigures, although I suppose you could count this as one brick-built character. So being the polybag, we don't have too much to look at today, and the description shows that quite nicely, reading, build one of the 4 dungeon bosses from Breath of the Wild and fight in the Sanctum to defeat the hero and control the world. Yep, pretty boring description, really didn't know how to talk about these guys, but let's take a closer look at them one by one. So, as I mentioned, of course, we have Fire Blight, Wind Blight, Thunder Blight, and Water Blight here. And firstly, you may notice some compromises, and that is because of the nature of this set, and the whole reason it exists is to be a 4-in-1. I don't think we'd get the Blights outside of this, personally. I feel like they're too samey to sell separately, so seeing them as a 4-in-1 or as an alternate build of each other is probably the way I think they go, which means we won't get a lot of their specialised elements, so Fireblight's sword would be in the blue colour, so it could be reused in one of the others. I doubt we'd get the hair on the back, although I've tried my best here, so just bear with me, these are mocks. So let's take a look inside the bag, and the first one we'll take a look at is Fire Blight, and you can see off to the right the pieces left over afterwards. So a couple of the standouts were obviously Water Blight's sword, and a couple of other elements as well. And Fire Blight has an actual build over here. I think he looks quite nice, personally. He's probably second or so out of my favourites. He's got full articulation on his arms. You can see there at the top shoulders and then at the hands as well. He's got some finger claws with his little fire piece in one hand and his big axe in the other. You can see the face mask is a different shape for him to match the in-game Fireblight, and the bottom of him is going to be different as well, representing the different kind of gushing out of the bottom of them. Next up we have Thunderblight here with his sword and shield combo, again in that trans blue colour to represent the Guardian technology. Again, same shoulder and arm rotation. You'll notice on this one though, in comparison to Fireblight, the body has been switched upside down, and that is purely to get the different body shapes, as 2 of the 4 have sort of thinner at the neck, wider at the bottom, and the other 2 are more muscly around the shoulders, so that's what I've shown here. And obviously these are the Breath of the Wild Blights, as the ones in Age of Calamity are extremely muscular in comparison. But yet again, you can see the leftover pieces, a bit more of an interesting selection this way around. And apart from that, the face is an incredibly different shape. I tried to represent Thunderblight's flowing locks of hair down his side, and the headpiece is incredibly differently shaped, as I talked about. I'll be showing you some comparison images in a minute when we get to the hand-drawn versions. Waterblight's up next with the spear, and he's probably one of the better looking ones, but less stable ones. I mean, he's not going to be able to stand up unless you put a transparent rod up that cone at the bottom. But again, he's using the bigger at the top shoulder orientation. He's got his head, which is in his nice crenellation form. You can see the leftover pieces, and just like all the others, it's both arm and shoulder rotation. And then Windblight, the worst of the 4 with the compromised head shape, although I think it's pretty close. His little gust jar on his arm and a normal hand. He doesn't have any trans blue pieces, and again a different bottom piece for his layout. And as we mentioned earlier, you can build one of the 4 out of this set. Taking a second look at Fireblight, firstly you can see him here in his hand-drawn form, looking the same, so I won't look at his details, but if we compare him to the in-game image, you can see that I've done an alright job making the shape of that helmet. You can also see the printed 1x1 round tile included in the set that is used for all 4 of their eyes, but you can only see it with the printing here. You can see that maybe would be printing on the body pieces, like to represent some of that ancient goopy stuff, but I thought it was best to leave it plain as this is a poly bag. But the biggest thing missing from Fireblight, and the thing that probably holds him back the most, is the hair. Next up, we have Thunderblight, with, as I said, the better shaped of the heads, and again, not perfect, but pretty close. I think this one's recognizable. I've used this one as the thumbnail plan for the Blights before, and I think his weapon looks pretty accurate using an old Bionicle piece, and we're just using a round dish to represent his shield. But again, you can see the hair there flowing down from the sides of the mask, and that's a pretty good representation. He's probably one of the more accurate ones, so I'm pretty pleased with him. Next up, we have Water Blight, which is the other one that's pretty accurate, with again that head shaping being fairly alright. You can see the eye in the middle, and it's definitely got that sort of Y-shaped look to it. You can see the spear arm as well as the red arm, and just like the others, he has about the same amount of detail, same amount of problems. I just like this one more because I actually think he's recognizable. Then finishing off the four, we have Wind Blight, who is probably the most suffering of the four. Although again, yet again, the head shape is fairly close. He's missing his hair, which is a bit of a problem, and his gun is severely undersized. But Wind Blight is probably the most generic of the four anyway, due to his lack of ancient weapons, and I suppose he has his missiles, but I couldn't really include those here. But anyway, that's a bit awkward. Yeah, well, we're going to go take a look at the model in studio now, but before we go over, I think it's important to point out why I chose to put these guys in this polybag. So, it's a small set. I guess the Blights probably deserve something a bit more, but I think this is the only realistic way we get them, just as I mentioned before. However, the thing about these Blights is that, well, they're kind of not very Lego-y. I'm not really sure how else you could transform them into Lego. Now, I hope to see the Blights in Lego form, meaning that we'll get to see how Lego properly does it, but they're such a small part of the Zelda universe that I thought it was interesting to see how they would transfer. With such awkward shapes and high detail levels, it was just interesting to me. But the other thing that should be on your guys' mind is the Blights tie into the next two sets we've got. So the idea would be is you'd buy the flagship of this wave, which we haven't seen yet, and then you'd buy the polybag, and then you could reconstruct a bigger scene inside that set. But let's go take a look at that studio. So here in studio you can see the four of them lined up, and we haven't really got much to show you here. You can see all of the extra part piles off in the distance, but really I just wanted to give you some more close-up looks at the angles on this, guys. There really isn't that much else to show with these smaller sets. I mean, there's just not that much going on in general, but you've got a nice posable character. You're getting a lot of value for your £5 here, especially like I mentioned earlier, where they link in with a certain character appearing in the final set, and how you could recreate the entire end sequence from Breath of the Wild over in that set. And really, these are almost collectible. If you imagine if these guys actually looked good, you could buy these, put them on your shelf, line them up as the four Banes of Breath of the Wild. I know they're not popular by any means, but they do look good. I like them as a concept, just not an execution. But yeah, they're a fairly simple build, some snot work, some interesting angles for the face pieces. As I said, some of these customs are just meant to illustrate my point more than anything, and I think these were really hard, so I'm proud of what I've managed to achieve. But let's go wrap up for the day. So that's going to do it for Z0021. Let me know what you guys thought down below, or any improvements you think I could have made, bearing in mind the whole premise of this was to show you a 4-in-1, not 4 accurate models separately. But anyway, we're getting very close to the end of Wave 2 now, with only 2 sets left to go, and next week in particular we'll be taking a look at Z0027, something that will connect with the last one. This one contains 622 pieces, and you'd be right if you said it was a castle. But what part? Anyway, leave your prediction down below, consider subscribing so you don't miss out as we wrap up here, and goodbye.